welcome to Your Family Dog, a podcast dedicated to helping families love living with dogs.
Welcome back to the Your Family Dog podcast. I'm your host, Tina Spring, and I'm joined today by my amazing friend, Timothy Renner. Timothy is an illustrator, author, and musician. His illustrations have appeared in the pages of various books, magazines, fanzines, and comics, as well as on many record and CD covers. Since 1995, Timothy has been making music both solo and with his band, Stone Breath. And they are if you have never listened to Stone Breath, go give it a listen. Timothy is the creator and co-host of Strange Familiars, a podcast concerning the paranormal, weird history, and folklore, as well as The Flowered Path, a podcast that focuses on the stories of saints, folk saints, miracles, and visionaries. Timothy currently resides in South Central Pennsylvania, where you might find him wandering in the woods. A few of his books are Don't Look Behind You, Bigfoot, West Coast Wildmen, Beyond the Seventh Gate, Where the Footprints End, Volume 1 and 2, that he co-authored with Joshua Cutchin, The Witch Cloud, The Haunted Bridges of Gettysburg, Bigfoot in Pennsylvania, and his most recent publication, I Have Never Minded the Loneliness, where he talks about the life and lives of hermits all over the world. And I know hermits are near and dear to your heart. I actually send you hermit stuff when I come across it all the time to be like, hey, I don't know if you've heard of this one before, but here you go. So welcome to Your Family Dog.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
So the reason that I invited you on, and we've been trying to set this up for a couple of years, is that in getting to know you, you have talked about your childhood and a childhood dog named Barney, and what an amazing relationship and best friend he was to you.
Yeah.
And so I thought our listeners might be interested to hear this one from a masculine perspective, and that we can kind of talk about Barney and kind of how that relationship, what it meant to you, what you learned from it.
Wow. Okay. First of all, I'm going to get emotional during this, so I'm just putting that out there.
Well, you have my hugs. It'll be okay. We often get emotional about loves that we have lost.
Yeah. Well, I mean, first off, and I've said this to you before, a boy and his dog is a real thing. At least from my perspective, in my experience, I had friends nearby up until I think third grade, when I was in third grade, and that's about the time that we got Barney as a puppy, who was named after Barney Fife on the Andy Griffith Show, by the way.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, he's a favorite of our entire household. But so then I grew up. There was nobody my age in the neighborhood. I had older brothers and stuff, but they didn't want me hanging out with them, and which at the time I was greatly offended by. But in perspective, I get it. You don't want your little brother hanging out. So it was me and that dog until at high school, when there was another friend that I ended up meeting. He had gone to a different school, even though he lived in the same area of the farm there. But all that time, it was just me and Barney. So we became very, very close indeed. And what a great companion! I can't imagine a better companion than his dog. So he was half collie, half German Shepherd, and
nice.
He was given to us by a breeder who was very upset that the two got together. And when my father went to pick up the dog, the guy said, "Get this thing out of here." Didn't charge him a cent. Said, "I don't want this thing. Get it out of here." Gave us this puppy who was amazing. Presented more as collie, as far as the way he looked, but he was 50-50 collie shepherd.
Do you have any photos of him?
Yeah, somewhere I do.
Oh, wow. Well, one day I'd love to have you share that with me if you come across them.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
your family is a beautiful collector of of all the things. So one day
Yes.
you'll come across it and be like, I think Tina wanted to see that.
I'm pretty sure Allison can put her hands on the photo because she rescued a photo of me and Barney and a couple other photos, I think, when after my parents died. So
That's wonderful.
yeah.
So so you got him as a puppy.
Hmm.
Was he supposed to be yours, or was he supposed to be for the farm, or
Family
for
dog.
just the whole family, just a
Yeah,
family dog?
he's a family dog. We had a little beagle before that had died a couple years previous. And my father just loved that beagle. Her name was Happy. And I was just, a real little kid, so I didn't bond in the same way with Happy that I did with Barney. Um, so I have fond memories of Happy, but just nowhere near the amount of experiences and the kind of memories I have with Barney. But yeah, it was a couple years later, and I think my dad just decided, oh, we need another dog on the farm. So
I mean, a dog on a farm is an important thing. I will also say that living that kind of life, there's a lot of research and discussion right now in the dog world about how drastically dogs' lives and environment have really changed in the last 50 years,
mm,
right? That 50 years ago, lots of dogs lived on farms and kind of procreated on their own, and that they had a ton of agency. So you know, they could just decide to hang out outside all day or not come in at night if you decided to camp with him outside
mhm.
because uh sometimes we young ones are like, I don't want to be in the house with everybody else.
Yeah, right.
Especially with a large family. Like that can be those dynamics can sometimes be complicated.
One of my stories about Barney is I had decided one summer for whatever reason, to spend the entire summer sleeping outside if it wasn't raining, and he was so devoted to me that I could literally use him as a pillow all night if I wanted to. He would just right beside me all night. Just never left my side, to my knowledge. Every time I woke up, he was right there. He's very, very protective of me for whatever reason. He he
So when you
really
say
was.
he was protective, was he just your constant companion, or did he actually like step in sometimes between, like I hear stories from families all the time about the young child is, wandering toward a stranger or toward the road or toward the cars or toward a ditch or whatever, and the dog literally gets between them and whatever the dog perceives to be a hazard and kind of pushes them gently back toward safety. Was it that kind, like what kind of protection
I've got.
did he
I'll give you.
provide?
I'll give you two examples. So one, I was in the yard playing one day, and there was a church in the neighborhood, a Methodist church, and the Methodist minister was just walking around, just sort of introducing himself to all the families. And he walked into the yard and walked up to me, and Barney literally put himself between me and him. And this guy stuck out his hand, and Barney was like, started growling. And I said, he won't let you touch me because he doesn't know you. And the guy's like, what? I said, he doesn't know you and he's not going to let you touch me. That's the way it is. I said, he's not going to hurt you, but he will not let you touch me. And he looked at me and said, that is a good dog.
That
He
is a
realized,
good dog.
yeah. And I said, well, and I never taught him that. I didn't teach him that. Another time I was walking home, this was in high school after I'd had a friend, and I would go to his house after school and we'd just hang out and do high school kid things. And, he would walk with me to his house, and then, so this is about a mile away from the farm, and then he would at some point decide, well, my place is at the farm. So we go back, but then he would howl the entire time. My mom said he'd just sit there and just howl because he knew I was somewhere around, but I wasn't at home. So I'm walking home about a quarter of a mile from our house. We had a neighbor, and they kept this big Newfoundland chained up, like on a short chain all day long, and they would let him loose at night. And this thing was not nice. And I was walking by their house, and this dog comes out, and he's growling and baring his teeth. Big Newfoundland, big old dog. And I'm kind of backing away and sort of like keeping my eye on him and trying to walk along. And a car happened to come between us. And when it came between, I thought maybe he'll get distracted and forget about me. I kind of tried to walk, along with the car as best as I could, but no, he was still there. So I could hear Barney howling down at the farm. So I yelled once, Barney, and this dog comes closer, and I yell it again. By the time I yelled the second time, I could hear his nails clicking on the road in a full run. And he came and took that dog by the neck, and I just got out of there. I don't, but last I saw was he had just collapsed that dog, took it right down, and I moved along, and then he just came up behind me like, I got you, buddy. So I don't think he killed the dog. But I think he knew there was business to be handled, and he handled it. Very, very protective. He was not going to let that dog hurt me.
Well, thank goodness. It so when I was a child, I was walking. We lived on a road that if you walked up it, it became a dirt road, and what we affectionately referred to as the Woodsy Way. And there was a creek, right? And my childhood was fascinating. So sometimes I just needed some space and to get away. And so my dog Penny and I, a little Jack Russell Beagle Cross, who was probably as wide as she was long, um, she and I would walk up to the creek, and sometimes I would sit and read, sometimes I would sit and cry, um, sometimes I would sit and sketch or write or whatever, or just hang out or catch crawfish or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and walking home one day, she was on a leash, but she, because we lived where it was still urban enough that you needed a leash, but she stopped in the road and was like yelling, which I had never, ever seen her do. Like it was a completely disparate behavior from anything we had seen previously. And she stopped me like dead in my tracks. Like, you are not going any further. And I'm thinking to myself, what is going on? And it turns out something had flushed deer, and the deer were going to cross. Like, this deer crossed the road in front of me that if I had reached out my arm, I could have touched them. And it did the whole Bambi on ice panicked deer thing,
Mm-hmm.
and then bounded off into the woods. And if she hadn't stopped me, like, that poor deer and I would have had a pretty massive collision that probably would not have ended great for either of us. So that was the first and not the only time that a dog has stopped me from walking into, even in my adult life, walking into situations that I was completely unaware of
Yeah.
that were about to happen, right? So I love that Barney had that too. I also love that even as a little kipper, you were clear enough about Barney's personality, and I am going to call it a personality, that he wasn't going to hurt the preacher. He was just going to tell the preacher no. And
Yeah.
I think that often as adults, right, navigating a world with kids and dogs or families and dogs or guests and dogs, sometimes we just need to know our dog, the
Mm-hmm.
dog in front of us, well enough to know, like, my dog is grumbling not because they're being ugly, but because they perceive a threat, and they're not going to escalate if whatever the thing is that they perceive to be a threat isn't escalating.
Mm-hmm.
I would tell you as a trainer, dogs have a lot more get along than they have let's have a knockdown drag out conflict. And often just our, I think as kids, we're often, it's, we just believe the dogs when we spend enough time with them. As adults, we lay all of the adults' layers of
Sure.
stuff
Yeah.
over all of that and second guess it and all that. So I know Barney holds a tremendous space in your heart and in your life. Um, what do you think that was about? Like, do you think just in the end, he and you aligned beautifully and he just was your friend?
That's certainly part of it. We grew up together. I was in third grade, and one of the great sadnesses is he just walked away. Um, we don't know where he went. He had free range of the farm, and when he got older, I remember one day I was in college, and I was looking around for Barney. I wasn't spending as much time at home at this point, but I could come back to the farm. I was like, where is he? And I think my dad said, oh, I haven't seen him in a couple of days or something. I literally could see him in the distance. He was in a farm field. I could see him laying down. And I called and called and called. And he finally got up and kind of very slowly walked over to me back to the farm, which, was a long way away. And um, I think I knew right then it was probably close to the end. And then one day, and I think this is, maybe you could tell me, I think this is natural um, for dogs. He just walked away, and we don't know. I mean, I presume he died, but I don't know where.
So I, I think I hear more of cats doing that. But I definitely think that it can happen in dogs, and especially in dogs that have the agency to decide.
Hmm.
Um, the last dog that was dying of old age that I chose to end that dog's suffering, you know, kindly. I was talking to the vet and I said, like, how do you know when it's time and how do you make these decisions? Because I'm filled with the same questions and angst everyone else is, right?
Yeah.
Um, thank goodness. Like that's a blessing to not be cavalier about the whole thing. And she said, we have the ability medically now to keep animals alive and functioning much deeper into the aging process than nature would.
Hmm.
And so it does mean that we face that burden more often versus because I think I had said to her, like, none of my dogs have ever just died in their sleep,
Hmm.
right? Like that I just woke up in the morning and my dog was laying on the bed, on the floor next to my bed or on my bed, and they were just gone. Um, and she said, well, yeah, because we intervene a lot.
Hmm.
Um, and yay that we have the ability to do that.
Right. Yeah.
Um, they have I hope, a better quality of life. So, but also I think it's interesting that I would say as a mom and as a grandma that college is a little bit of our kids wandering away too,
Hmm.
right? That we just are on to a different developmental stage of life. And you and Barney still kind of were traveling in your own ways together in a
Yeah.
similar way.
Yes. So he did not wander from the farm. That is not something he did. He stayed there. He was not fixed. Um, and that's,
It was a different time. Well, like, we're not judging.
yeah, but I'm just saying, like, you know, dogs go into heat and male dogs roam. He did none of that. He did none of that. He was always on the farm. He was always there. I I used to get on the school bus and I would see him go sit under. We had these row of pine trees in the front yard of the farm. I'd see him go sit under the pine trees, and I would go to school, and I'd come back, and he'd be sitting on the pine trees, and it was a funny little ritual I'd do. The bus driver would open the door, and I'd clap my hands. I'd say, "Barney," and he'd run up, and all the kids on the bus would pat. I was sitting in the back. They'd pet him as he came all the way back to me, and then we'd walk off the bus together. Not every day, but enough where the bus driver got a kick out of it. It wasn't a big deal, and the kids loved it. And one day, my mom said, I said something about, how does he know what time to go back to meet me for the bus? And my mom said, no, you don't understand. He doesn't leave there. She said, he goes out there and waits for you all day. Blew my mind. I'm like, all day. He just sits there and waits for me. But that's the way he was. He didn't leave the farm. So when I saw him that day, and he really didn't want to come back until I just called him again and again, that to me, looking back, I could say, okay, that was probably near the end. And he was trying to just go off, and maybe he knew, maybe he didn't want me to have to deal with that,
Well, I do wonder that sometimes. Like, do animals sometimes? So this is just my personal opinion. Mileage may vary for other people. I have seen this manifest in my life. I have had dogs that the only way that I am okay with our parting is if I go first.
Yeah.
Right? Years later, decades later, my heart still searches for them all the time. So now I'm getting choked up. I think our dogs, I know some of my dogs have put up with tremendous suffering when by all rights they should have passed on, that I wasn't ready. And so they stayed so that I could find some peace. And maybe that's what Barney was doing too, that he wasn't ready and he knew you weren't ready.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I would have gone overboard to try to keep him around, I think.
Right. Yeah. That we're like, I'll do anything.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a thing. So talk to me about what do you remember is the funniest thing that you ever saw Barney do?
Definition of a good dog, honestly. Like, really. So there's two things. When he was young, my father did not take to him. Like I said, my father loved that beagle. At first, he did not take to him. And Barney had jumped up and torn the plastic off of this. We had this sort of a mud porch on the back of the farm. My dad had put plastic up for some reason to block out the wind or something. And he had torn the plastic off. My dad got really mad at him, really angry at him, oh, that dumb dog and all that stuff. One day, I went outside, and the door on that mud porch, it had a handle, like a spring handle, and you could just hit it, and the door would kind of pop open, and you could walk out. And one day I went outside, and Barney was in on the porch. I just went out real quick for something, and all of a sudden Barney's behind me. It's like, how'd you get out? And then I realized he had watched me do that a number of times and just figured out, oh, I can just do that. I can just hit the... And that's what he was trying to do when he tore the plastic down. He was trying to let himself out.
He was trying to open the door.
Yeah, that's all it was. Well, one day my dad was there, and he's, dumb dog, blah, blah, blah. And I said, no, Barney had done it. He came out. My dad's like, how did he get out? I was like, he let himself out. My father's like, what are you talking about? I said, he opened the door and let himself out. My dad's like, he's like, no, he didn't. I was like, stand right here. And I took Barney, I put him on the porch, I went outside, and I called him one time. Up, hits the thing, and out he comes. And from that moment on, my dad's like, oh, this is a really smart dog. His whole attitude about him changed. So it was that. And then The other thing that I think is very funny because we grew up in Maryland. Crabs are a thing in Maryland. If I don't know if you know, like Maryland crabs, we love crabs. It's just a thing. That dog never got into the garbage for anything. Never, just never. And then one day we were messing around, and again, I don't know if this is a good thing. I was a kid. I was eating crab. I gave him crab. This. I don't know if that's a good thing for dogs or not, but not knowing any better, and like I'm eating it, and I gave it to him. He became such a fiend for crab from that moment on. If we ever had crabs, he would tear. That's the only time he would get in the garbage. He could smell it, and he would go after the crabs. He loved it. That's the only thing. So it's like this is like total like Maryland dog. So I found that quite amusing. He was a
That's
funny guy.
fantastic. And
Yeah.
I love that. So I often feel a little bit like a translator between families and their dogs,
Hmm.
right? And what often we view as a dog, like you're talking about tearing down the plastic, often what we will initially view as like, oh, the dog was being naughty, can be something as simple as the dog just learning something new. To
Hmm.
like in that case, it might have been Barney in the beginning avoiding soiling on the mud porch,
That's 1,000% what it was. I think he was letting
right?
himself
Like
out,
let himself out so he can go
go to the
potty,
bathroom.
so that he's
Yep.
not bothering anybody.
Yep. I think
Um, or
that's
going to
absolutely.
find his and or going to find his boy when a neighbor dog is menacing or
Yeah. Right.
whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, they're so smart, right?
Hmm.
They're so smart. We're going to have a guest coming up on the podcast who's going to talk about the science behind the emotions of dogs and sentience. And it kind of bewilders me that I still find myself having to have conversations with people about that dogs think and plan and emote and have empathy and grieve and even plan for the future, right?
Mm.
The animals, many animals have the ability and do all of these things. Because I think sometimes we're like, oh, that's a dumb animal. Um, and the science kind of makes you twist your the science will twist your kaleidoscope a little bit.
Yeah.
I know it does mine. And it makes me question lots of things. Some of it profoundly uncomfortable, but we all have to navigate it. So I think it's for a long time, science kind of mainstream science kind of perceived and non-human animals as just like proteins strung together in like some sort of
Yeah.
biological machine that only responded to stimulus.
Hmm.
And like that's just do they respond to their environment? Sure, but that is a much broader and colorful version than I think kind of what we were all taught. And I will say, so you and I are similar ages, right? Our dogs were, except the dogs that my parents were professionally breeding and showing. Our dogs were all spayed and neutered, but there were lots of farms that did not have spayed and neutered dogs. Um, those dogs still had great lives. And in some cases, like if we ask them, some dogs would like we have one dog who would love to tell you that he's a wolf and that he could live outside and that we're just like we're he doesn't really need us.
Hmm.
And then I have another dog that, complains wildly that he has to go outside if the grass is wet without us or in the dark. So, like, they're on the whole continuum. Kind of, I think of it like introversion and extroversion. Well, dogs
Yeah.
definitely have that too, and the indoorsy and the outdoorsy. I was not raised very outdoorsy, but I'm just dumb about it. And so, while I think I would like being more outdoorsy, I'm also like, have certain apprehension about that. And I know you and Chad have both laughed at me about that, and I appreciate your humor. Um, so did you find it as a child easy to understand what Barney was communicating, or was that sometimes difficult?
No, I found it extremely easy. I think and this is another funny story. I really think he thought he was human. He didn't think there was any difference between us. And so my dad, animals don't come in the house. When my dad would leave, dad's passed, what's he going to do? I would let Barney in the house. Come on in, Barney. As soon as he left, he was my buddy. He's coming in the house with me. And one day, just as a joke, I don't know if you remember in the 80s, the concert shirts were often like the 3/4 sleeve, like baseball kind of
Yeah.
shirts. For some reason, I was wearing one and he had followed me up to my room and I put this shirt on him. He could not have been happier. He
Yes.
was he was bouncing around the house like, I'm a person now. I'm just like you. He was so happy, and I really think it was just like, yeah, I'm just like you now because I was wearing a very similar shirt, I think, and he was just. I've never saw him like bounce around like that, so happy. So I really think he thought he's like, I'm one of those, you know.
My daughter, at one point, we had a Doberman and he adored her. And so Gus goes up to Victoria's bedroom with her to hang out, whatever they're doing. And he comes down in her track jersey and basketball shorts, wearing around his neck a little sand art necklace that she had emptied out and written me a note, and like a carrier Doberman, right? Like
Oh, that's
rolled
funny.
it up little and put it, and she called the necklace his mojo. Like she said, that's what he calls it. Like the way she explained it to me is that Gus came upstairs and would say, I need my mojo. And I probably should ask her how she knew that's what he wanted. But the same thing, like he came down wearing clothes, like, and they're loose, right?
Mm,
She wouldn't have done it if he had resisted or grumbled or
right,
fought with
right.
her. Like that was not how she interacted with our dogs. But he definitely came downstairs proud of himself in his tank top and shorts,
Hmm.
wearing his mojo, and walked over and was like insistent that I needed to look at the necklace, right? So I can remember being like a 35-year-old mom and pulling the necklace off and going, what is in here? And wondering where the sand is.
Right,
Where is the
right.
sand that I'm going to have to clean up, right? Like, and it's dyed. What is it ruining on the beige carpet upstairs, right? But she had just written me like a little note about that she loved me.
Oh,
And so I like wrote a note back, and that became a regular thing between Gus and Victoria and I, that, I was a stay-at-home mom, and I was working too, but I was a stay-at-home mom. Um and sometimes that was an easier communication. And I could always say to him, like, hey, come here. And I'd write a note and roll it up and put it in his mojo, which he wore most of the time if she was home. And I would say, go find your girl. And he would take her the mojo. So what did Barney call you?
I don't know. I'm guessing.
Interesting.
I'm guessing just Tim. I don't know.
Just Tim?
I'm
Not
I'm
even
guessing.
Timothy. Tim.
Yeah,
He got the
I think
informal version.
yeah, I think it would he would have been very informal with me. Maybe just buddy. I don't know. He was
Yeah, like you're just his best friend.
we
He's
were
like, no,
just
it's my
yeah,
friend.
yeah.
And in the last few years, actually, Katie, who's a part of the background team for Your Family Dog now, is the first person that I met who, whenever she meets an animal, she always says, "Oh, hello, my friend." Right? Like she refers to them as her friend.
Mhm.
And seeing the change in animals when that's the countenance, and that I have totally and completely adopted that I'm like, "You're so smart, my friend." Right?
Right.
Because I think in many ways, like going, "Oh, it's a dog," versus, "Oh, it's my friend," that has a different responsibility and feel to it that I think informs, my customers, the families with which I practice and get to enjoy my life, uh, and my cat and my dogs and all of that, it's a different feel. It's a different level of relationship.
Mhm.
What's the weirdest thing he ever attempted to eat?
Ooh. really taxed my memory.
I mean, the crabs are definitely a thing because although I mean, lots of animals, lots of dogs will fish and eat eat fresh caught fish or crabs or whatever.
But yeah, I mean, we
So,
heavily seasoned Maryland crabs. That's the
oh,
thing.
heavily seasoned.
Yeah, Old Bay, like ton of Old Bay on them.
Good old Bay.
Yeah. So yeah, I think he was just a Marylander. Let me say, I don't know. I have to think on that one. Um, yeah.
Is there ever a time that you and Barney had a quarrel, had a conflict over something, a difference of opinion? Thank you very much.
No,
No,
honestly, I
he
can't think
always
of a
just was like,
single time.
you do you, Timothy. I'm with
I
you. I got your back."
We were so tight. So I have my next brother in age to me. Used to always say, "That's my dog. He's my dog. He loves me best. He's my dog." And one day, now let me say, if anybody was down at the barn or heading towards the woods, Barney usually wanted to be there. And I got so tired of him saying that. And I said, all right, I'm going to sit him in between. You go down to the barn, call him all you want. I'm going to tell him to stay. I'm going to stay at the house. I'll tell him to stay right there. He called and yelled and yelled. And I said, stay. And he stayed right there. And then I said one thing. I said, Barney. And he came running to me. And I said, don't tell me he's your dog, you know?
Right,
And,
like he gets a choice.
yeah. You like, that's the ultimate test. You had every advantage being down. He wants to be in the barn. He knows that's the fun place. That's where, he had every advantage of that. And he just came to me and I just looked at him like, there you go. You know, It's- and I didn't even say it's my dog. I just said it's not yours. He was our dog. He was the family dog.
What was his he was your dog. Well, and he would probably say that you were his kid.
Hmm. Yeah.
And he likes all the kids. He likes all the
Right.
people.
But we grew
But
up
you were
together.
his kid.
We grew up together. I was, that's all I can say is like we had that. It's like having a twin in a way. You just grow up together with this person.
Yeah. I mean,
Canine
I
in that
grew up
case.
with Penny. I grew up
Yeah.
with Penny,
Yeah.
right? And Victoria grew up with Gus Parker. So, um, yeah, like I think sometimes we do grow up with them.
Hmm.
Um, and I don't know, they're just magic. You and I have talked about that. Part of the reason that I do what I do, and the advocacy that I provide for families with dogs and for dogs and cats and horses and other animals too, um, is that I really do owe them my life.
Mm.
In many ways, they took um, a kid who was pretty sad and pretty lonely and, all my yuck, and they never ever brought it up. They never told any of my stories. They kept my secrets.
Yep.
Um, and I owe them. I
Oh yeah.
owe them that,
Yeah.
right?
I I
Um,
I remember a day coming home from high school. I don't remember specifically what it was. I was so sad. Something had happened. I don't know if it was between me and a girlfriend. I don't honestly remember. I just remember this is how, right? The thing I was upset about is gone now. But I was very upset. And I walked out in the woods and I was crying and he just sat next to me. He just sat there next to me the whole time. Like, what is that? That's a friend, you know?
that's a friend. Exactly. And they don't have to have words. They do. The words are just in our hearts,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think, most of the time. But yeah, like the tremendous comfort that they provide. I mean, so Sid Happens has trained quite a few service animals, and to see those partnerships, and some of it is straight, like, somebody has PTSD, it's emotional stuff.
Yeah.
And the amazing partnership between often men and their dogs is something I absolutely think that most women don't really have a look in to. We don't like, I don't doubt for one minute that you love your family to the moon and back. But I'm pretty sure that you and Barney shared things that the rest of the world doesn't know about and never
Yeah.
will.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I mean, do you think, you know, as a trainer and as a woman, do you think there's something in men and our trouble expressing our emotions sometimes that having something like a dog, like where you have that unspoken sharing, that might be part of the connection?
Yes, I do. I think from the outside looking in, and again, nobody has to agree with me. This is just my opinion. I often think about how difficult it is to be a man or a boy in this world, right? My best friends in the world have long been men. I do have a, some women friends too, to be fair, but my relationships with guys is just easier sometimes. And I will say, from the outside looking in, men and boys kind of get it both ways, right? If they show their sweet, soft underbelly and emotion and empathy, there's a price to be paid for that.
I think even more
I
so in the 80s and 70s, you know?
Yes, I would agree.
Yeah.
Um and I also think that part of it is how we process. And if I'm wrong, like by all means, jump in and tell me. I think a lot of times men process on their own
Mhm.
and women process verbally. So that sometimes puts us in a pickle where I think it becomes unsafe for men and boys to tell us they're yuck, to tell us all those deep things, because women talk about it and girls talk about it, and that can feel, I imagine, like a betrayal
Mhm.
when it's not at all intended that way. I think it's intended as, I need help processing this. Like, this is,
Right.
I need to talk about it. I need to emote about it. And so I think some of those misalignments, and I really do just think they're misalignments. I don't think
Mhm.
there's, I think it becomes, the message becomes to many boys, and yes, maybe more so in the past, let us hope,
Right.
that that just wasn't safe. And so um, there are, there is lots of research like Darwin, and um, there are some other examples that are falling out of my head at the moment. But there's lots of historical data about pretty influential people, men in the world, who their relationship with their dog was precious and more intimate in some ways than maybe their emotional life with their dog was more intimate in some ways than their relationship even with their children or their spouses or their siblings or their parents, because their secrets were safe. There was no
Mhm.
judgment. Though
Mhm.
I will say occasionally my dogs judge me um, when I'm a goofball and they're like, "You are the weirdest human I have ever encountered." To which I say, "Huzzah!" Right? Like, yes, you have the weird mom. Sorry. Like, I used to tell my kids that too. Like, sorry, you have the weird mom.
Yeah.
Like, it's the mom you got. So you're
Yeah.
just kind of stuck with my weird. So if, knowing full well that you're talking to moms and grandmas, um, and dads and grandpas too, and aunts and uncles, and thinking back to this amazing relationship that you and Barney shared, what do they need to know about that? Like, are there ways that we can foster it? Are there ways that we can get in the way of it? Um, were there things like that your mom constantly got on to Barney about that you were like, "No, this is our relationship and it's magic and those things are important to me."
Um, I think it would have been more dad. I again before that. he opened the door, Dad, oh, that dog's dumb, never be as smart as Happy, he had put this beagle up on a pedestal, and Barney had to win him over. But no, I think for the most part, I wouldn't say my mom was an animal person, but she grew to love that dog too. I mean, she absolutely grew to love him. I don't remember them ever complaining. I remember my mom, for some reason, deciding that he needed a haircut one year and took him to a groomer, and they groomed this poor dog like a poodle. And he looked absolutely ridiculous. And then learning later on that no, like some of that hair, she thought she was doing a good thing and keeping him cool, and like learning later on, like, no, that hair actually helps keep him cool. You need to, like, that's just his breed, his hair. So she, I think she did her best. She goofed on that one, but no, he was such a special guy, honestly, that I don't think you could find a person in our family that would have a bad word to say about him. And that is unusual given my family.
Yes, family is sometimes like, oh, the dog. Yeah.
But
And
yeah,
sometimes that can be difficult to navigate.
he was just beloved. And I think my mom recognized that I probably needed a friend, and he was that friend. She was big on, this is the 70s, go outside and play. That was getting on my nerves, go
Oh,
outside and
yeah.
play.
Oh, yeah.
And
Like, I can remember, like, my mom used to just turn us out in the summer, like, turn you
mhm,
out after breakfast and
yep.
come
I,
back
I
for lunch, and then turn you out for the afternoon and come back for dinner and then turn you out in the evening. And
Yep. I would disappear. I would eat breakfast, and I would pack a lunch for myself, and I'd disappear all day long. And parents hear this today, and and
they're shocked.
me too, as a parent. Like, I can't imagine, a 10-year-old kid just going away for an entire day, not knowing where he is, and he'll come back. Believe me, my dad would whistle. He had a really, really loud whistle, and if you weren't back for dinner by the third whistle, yeah, there was a problem. So you kind of had to keep an eye on the time, which I knew more by the sun. I never wore a watch. I could just, basically tell what time it was, what time I needed to head back towards home. But I would disappear for, hours upon hours upon hours at a time. And even at night, I had an agreement, it was an unspoken agreement with my parents. I got very good grades. I was the last of 6 kids. And I think, in a way, every kid's like a brick. And by the 6th one, you're a little bit numb, right? So,
You're like, he'll be fine.
right. But from a very young age, I had access to the farm at night. It was basically, if you want to be out there at night, fine. Just keep your
They
grades
may
up.
have just been too tired to argue with you.
It might have been that. It really might have been. But I really feel like it was like, you keep your grades up, do what you want. Because I never really had a bedtime, and But in any case, I think part of their comfort was that is they knew Barney was going to be with me wherever I went all the time. So I literally had a protector next to me, and a smart one at that. He I truly believe, had something happened to me, he would have known what to do. As far as fostering that relationship, I don't know how. I think I don't know how it was done. I really think a big part of it is that we grew up together on a farm with a lot of place to explore and a lot of time to just be with each other. I wouldn't know how to tell someone to make that happen, because it just happened. I did very little training with him. You know, sit. He would stay by my side. If we walked along the roads, I would tell him to stay. If cars came, he would get off the road. He's just very good, and I think a lot of that was probably just repetition over time, that to me just seemed like it came to him naturally. But, maybe I just sort of taught him over time without realizing I was teaching him, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's organic learning, and
Mhm.
it's what, like, the official terms are sequencing, right? Where
Okay.
the dog is conditioned that a certain environmental cue means a certain thing.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's probably one of the most underutilized things in dog training. It's one of the things that makes like an adult dog that you've journeyed with for a long time be like a pair of jeans that just always fit you right. It doesn't matter if
Yeah.
you gain 5 pounds or lose 5 pounds, they're still so comfortable and they
Right.
just fit, right? It's also part of the angst of a young dog and part of the grief of an elderly dog
Mm.
is um is that sometimes some of that gets lost in translation or isn't installed yet.
Hmm.
Were there dogs on the farm after Barney? Do you know?
There was one. Yeah. And he suffered for not being Barney. And that's really,
Oh,
he was a golden
so you
retriever.
you became your dad.
No, no, not for me. I think just for in
Oh,
general. Like he was a sweet dog, but he just
he wasn't
his only
Barney,
problem was he wasn't Barney, right? There was nothing
and
wrong
he
with him.
wasn't happy.
Yeah. It's so, but yeah, he was fine. And in fact, that was Allison, my wife, was terrified of dogs because of the way she was brought up. Very, very early in our relationship, when we were dating, I stopped by the farm for something, and I said, "Hey, just wait out here. I'm just going to run in real quick." And she's like, "But there's your dog's out here." I'm like, "You'll be fine." And I went in the house, and I came out, and here the golden retriever name was Nick. Here, Nick's leaning on her, and she's petting him, and she looks up at me. She says, "I love him." So he was just a sweet dog. He just wasn't Barney, and poor guy. It wasn't his fault, you know.
So there's an interesting thing. So I sometimes get families who are thinking about getting a dog, and sometimes one of the parents doesn't really like dogs or is really afraid of them. Um, but there was something about that golden retriever that helped Allison love him
Hmm.
and become comfortable with him. Um, I know you would love to share your life with a dog, the right dog.
Hmm.
Um, and that your family, the rest of the family is like, no, we are not doing that. No, no, no. Um, and that has been sometimes delicate conversations.
Hmm.
Um, what would you say to the mom of the, I don't know, 8-year-old little boy who needs a friend, who's thinking about a dog, but it's not really in her wheelhouse? What would you tell her to
And
think about?
as I said when we started off, a boy and his dog is, I know it's a trope, but I think it's a real thing. And there's a real help there in developing kindness, I think. And coming from a family that wasn't always kind, I think a large part of my empathy and kindness came from my relationship with animals, and Barney in particular. Um, I think there's an emotional connection there that is borderline supernatural. I can't put it any other way. It's magical. It's absolutely magical.
It is. And I agree with you. Like you and I chatted quite a bit before we hit the record button um about, you know, our individual faiths and and uh and how important these relationships are to us and what that speaks to us.
Hmm.
Um and I know that that's not for everybody, and that's totally okay. Like I'm judgment free on all that.
Yeah.
Nobody has to agree with my lens. My lens is just my lens. But
As
like
I
I honor
say,
their, I hope they honor mine.
got to follow the hum, and what hums for me might not hum for you. And that's,
Exactly.
just,
Yeah. And some of it might, and some of it might not. So
yeah.
I don't know. I think A Boy and His Dog is a wonderful way for us to wrap up. I do have a question. I have not read um, all of your books yet.
Mhm.
In I never minded the loneliness. Are there dogs that um like I know at least some of the hermits that I've heard you tell their stories,
Mhm.
dogs were a big part of their life. Like they often had a dog
Yeah.
that was their constant companion and best friend.
Mhm.
Um, do you find that that's a theme that kind of you saw throughout that research?
Often. I think it kind of went, they were either like animal crazy and they loved animals, and they would have, some of these guys had pet squirrels and a pet dog and a pet raccoon, and they could come out of their cabin and hold up their hands, and wild birds would land on their hands. They had this intensely wonderful connection with nature, and some just wanted to be alone, I think. And it's not for us to say, but
Of course.
a lot of these folks are in the late 1800s. A lot of them are Civil War veterans. We would not have diagnosed PTSD at that time. I think some of these fellows were dealing with that, and I think they just could not handle society. And I think it was some of those folks that really just wanted to be alone with themselves. But yeah, a lot of them had wonderful relationships with dogs and other animals as well.
I think I remember a dog named Toby
Yes, it was a
in one of
cat.
the
It was,
stories.
it was a cat
Oh, a
named Toby.
cat named Toby.
Yeah, that's the
Yes,
Hermit
and
of Irving Castle. So he had a tombstone made. So he lived in a cave in Massachusetts. He had a tombstone made for his cat, and when he died, they moved the tombstone from the cave. He's in the town cemetery there in Irving, Massachusetts. So you can see his tombstone, and behind it, it says there's a little marker that says Toby. And unless you know his story, you won't know what it means. But it's his stone is marked, the hermit, and then right behind that is Toby. So they actually moved his cat's tombstone to be with him there. So. And my favorite hermit that I discovered in the book is John Stink. He's a Native American Osage, and he had a whole troop of dogs. They said any dog needed a home and they found its way to him, they had a home. And he just became my absolute favorite of all the hermits. But tragic story involving his dogs. At some point, they were killed. There was a In the newspaper. There's actually there was a rabies scare in the town. It's Pawhuska, Oklahoma, and you can actually read in the newspaper, it says all dogs must be muzzled except for John Stinks, because his dogs were so well trained and everybody knew him that they were fine. So it literally said in the paper, except for John Stinks dogs, all dogs must be muzzled. A short bit later, a matter of weeks, I think, in the newspaper, another story pops up where a marshal shot and killed all his dogs, and he
no.
he was so hurt by this, and I truly believe that was a malicious thing, because people knew him and they knew his dogs. It was in the paper. They had to have known, you know what I mean? They literally made an exception
Yeah.
for him. Well, and John Stink is so hurt by this, he vows, I will never come to Pawhuska again. And he doesn't, except for one time. I found one visit. He leaves and never comes back. And he was sort of this, kind of a beloved figure in town. It was a curiosity, but also they would go to him for weather predictions and things like that. So he was definitely known as the, the town hermit kind of thing. But he never went back. It broke his heart, but he did over time. He got more dogs, and at his funeral, they said his dogs were sitting at the coffin, just sitting there. So,
Well, and you and I share a modern day hermit as a dear friend who passed away on
yeah.
Valentine's Day this year. And um he lost both of his dogs.
Hmm.
And I don't know about you, but I do believe that those losses expedited us losing Maynard,
Yeah, I think they
because I
probably
think
accelerated things.
he
Yeah.
didn't, he missed them so terribly
Yeah.
and trusted them more than I think he really trusted anybody else.
Again, I think he had connection with those hounds that he didn't have with other people. And good, bad, otherwise, it doesn't matter. That's what his connections were, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, it's good that he had the connection, but I'm saying if someone's saying, well, he should have had connections with people, whatever, we can make those judgments, but he had the connection with the dogs, and that's a fact.
Yes. Yeah. And it was, as his health was failing, he was more concerned about the dogs than he was himself,
Yep. Yep.
which was which was inspiring and terribly sad, I
Hmm.
think, for all of us.
Yeah.
Well, Timothy, I want to thank you for just loving the world how beautifully that you do,
Oh, thank you.
and for crying with me as we discuss our dogs of the past and how much we love them. Um, and I'm just honored that you would join me on the podcast
Well,
today.
thank you for having me.
And one day I'm going to try to get you a dog, buddy. Like
I keep
maybe one
telling.
day.
So the war is between the rabbit side of the family and the dog side of the family, which I love the rabbit too. Don't get me wrong. This rabbit is a dear creature. It showed up in our backyard. It is super sweet. We've had a number of rabbits over the years. This is definitely the sweetest rabbit we've ever had. She's a sweetheart, and she showed up in our backyard. What are we going to do? It's,
Right.
domestic rabbit just
She's your
shows up in
rabbit.
our. Yeah, yeah. So
Exactly.
I have no ill feelings toward the rabbit, but the girls, my wife and my daughter are extremely opposed to a dog because they fear for the rabbit's life. But I have said, the rabbit goes, I'm getting a dog. We'll see how that
Well,
goes.
and there are dogs that just don't have high prey drive
I know,
about
but
stuff.
they refuse to believe that.
So I just placed a dog with my cousin who was a stray. Somebody picked him up. He and his pregnant girlfriend found a home for all the puppies, found a home for mama after she was spayed, neutered him, and was asking us to help find a home for him. So this dog is amazing. Like, he broke out of a fence and got into a chicken coop and just was sitting in the middle of the chicken coop, delighting over all of his feathered friends, right? Like, zero prey drive. And I thought of him for you. And then I thought, oh, the girls won't believe me that
they,
he
they yeah, they refuse to
doesn't
believe.
chase, like, he has like no prey drive at all. Like, just an absolutely delightful beast. Um, but yeah, my heart is gonna hang on that there is a dog that will journey with you in the future and that will keep the bunny safe and sound as well, and keep you safe and sound.
Yeah,
Because you
yeah,
hike a lot by yourself.
I do indeed. And I've often said it. Even as a biosensor, if not a protector, even as just something that's because they'll alert to things well before we will. I know that from experience. So even just somebody
Absolutely.
let me know some other things are around. I was hiking yesterday and I came across a maybe bear track, and I thought, I'm out here alone. And there's a big old bear track here. If that's indeed what it was, it kind of looked like it. I sent it to my friend John who knows tracks. He's like, oh, that's a very interesting track, which means
Get out of the
quite,
woods.
quite
Back up.
possibly. So I'm looking around going, I wonder how old this track is, and I wonder how long ago it was made. So yeah, even just as a biosensor to let me know, like, hey, stuff's around or not, I would quite appreciate that.
They do often notice the things that we're kind of dumb to.
Hmm.
Those noses, man, those
Oh yeah,
noses.
oh yeah.
Well, again,
Thank you
thank you
so.
for coming on, and
Oh, thank you.
maybe
Thanks
one
for
day
having
we'll
me.
have you on to talk about other dog stories from all the many, 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 many stories that you collect over your career.
I'd be
I
happy to.
delight in them, and I am so grateful that we're friends. And so Tim actually had Strange Familiars was the first podcast that I ever listened to, and I stay a supporter and don't listen to it often enough. I'm way, way, way behind, but I'll catch up at some point while I'm quilting.
I am
And
the same way with. Look, you get into this business, you make a lot of friends, and they all make podcasts, and I want to support them all and keep up with it, and I can't do it. And there's podcasts like for me, it was Sasquatch Chronicles. That was the podcast that made me become a podcaster, and I just don't have the time to. I wish I did.
Well, and me too. Like, I love Sasquatch Chronicles. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you a funny story. So I was taking a quilting class of all things, and someone recognized my voice from being the voice that introduced Sasquatch Chronicles.
wow.
This is Tina
Yeah.
from Athens, Georgia, right?
Yeah.
And she like squealed and
Wow.
said, "Oh my goodness, you're Tina from Sasquatch Chronicles," which I don't own Sasquatch Chronicles at all. Like, I just
Right.
was the
Sure.
dork who recorded introducing it. And I said yes. And it was the first time I was treated like a celebrity. And so we took a selfie together, and she sent it to her husband, and he was like, "No way." And she was like, "Way." And so, yeah, it was like this big geek fest.
That's
So,
amazing. I
and I love that from Sasquatch Chronicles, I learned the phrase, you could be right.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great
And that
one.
it's a beautiful blessing to the world that when someone is telling me something, I'm like, you could be right. And it's a
Yeah.
beautiful freedom to
Hmm.
have that in my back pocket from Wes. So, and Wes
Absolutely.
is a big dog guy too.
Oh yes. Oh yes. He's a
So
big dog guy. You see if he should come on one time because he has a real love
see
with
what
it.
he tells me about him.
Yeah.
He's so busy. Ugh, we all
Eh,
are.
yeah. Yeah.
Well, again, thank you.
Oh,
And
thanks for having
and
me.
and I love you, and you know that.
I
And
love you
I
too.
wish you
It's
all the best.
wonderful to talk, and we should keep up more than just on podcasts.
Absolutely. I'll make a bigger effort in doing that. I know I'm coming up to New York in August, and
Okay.
so maybe I'll make a side quest and maybe get to go to Gettysburg with
Sounds
you.
good.
You
Sounds good.
promised me a tour, so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, if you like the podcast, if you enjoyed today's episode, please like, share, think about, becoming our friend and supporting us in a bigger way. If you have ideas of topics you'd like us to cover or interesting people you'd like us to interview, please feel free to email me at yourfamilydogpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it for now. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening to Your Family Dog. Got questions? Interesting ideas? Visit www.yourfamilydogpodcast.com to share your thoughts.